Hey, Amber, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Super excited to be here.
I'm so pumped to have you. So why don't we start off, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into doing what you're doing.
Sure. So I started out as a health coach, actually.
Oh my gosh, me too. This is so funny.
Oh, wow. Did you go to IIN?
Well, no, I was with Beachbody. So I was doing network marketing and got like certification in physical therapy, like all kinds of stuff. Sorry, go
Amazing,
ahead.
amazing.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I was feeling like I was dying a slow death in my cubicle in finance. And so that's what I went into as health coaching originally. I moved to Bali, and from there I was seeing my health coaching clients. It was really awesome. And people kept asking me, you have this money system and you seem like not to be stressed about money. Can you show me what you're doing? And I said, sure, no problem. I was in this thing called Tribe Wanted. And that's where we would have, we would be working on our startup 50% of the time. And then we would have 25% of the time where we'd be helping other people. And the other 25% would be exploring the island. Well, most people in Bali are pretty good on their health front. You know, like they're there for the green smoothies and everything.
Yeah.
So people were asking me about the money. And so I started doing skill shares, and people were asking me to go to retreats and talk about money. And I realized that there was a big gap between how money has been handled in the past and even how it was taught in my own health coaching school. I have a degree in finance, and I had no idea what to do with the money that came into my business. And so from there, it just kind of morphed into, well, this is seriously a gap that needs to be filled. And with my holistic background plus the practical education that I have, that's how it started. And so at this point, what I do is I help service-based entrepreneurs set up a beautiful financial foundation that is meant to be built with all of the intentions and purpose behind why they went into business for themselves, so that they can run a profitable business, they can have a business that's paying for the things that they truly want to experience, and still have money in the bank for taxes and all their expenses.
Amazing. I didn't know you lived in Bali. That is so fun.
Oh, it was so fun. I didn't want to leave. If I didn't have a dog back home and my boyfriend, I probably wouldn't have come back.
How long were you there for?
About 6 months.
Amazing.
But I was meant to be there for about 8 weeks, and I just kept extending it because I couldn't leave.
Yeah. Oh, that's on my bucket list. Somewhere I'm going to go. So fun. Okay. So what's the biggest mistake you see entrepreneurs are making in the early days of their business with their finances?
I think the very first thing is, well, there's two things. One, I think many are scared to actually look at what it is that they want to be making in their business. Like they have an idea, they may have a generic goal that they heard from a business coach or from a book or something, but sitting down and seeing, what is it that I actually want money for? And what is it that I actually need money for? And coming up with a goal for them to then say, okay, this is my first goal. This is what I need to do first. So that's one thing. Another one is assuming that the only way to start out in business is to take out a loan or to take out financing.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times that's just the assumption, and there's absolutely a way to do it without going into a lot of debt.
Can you share some of those ways?
Sure. So the first thing would be to really get clear on what it is that you want to be making. And I'm a huge proponent of starting, especially with a service-based online business. It's so easy to start with low expenses and to still have your day job. And I remember being in my day job and thinking, I want to be out of here. And I would listen to podcasts at 4 a.m. and get my hustle in before 6 a.m. and then go into work. And I really wanted to not be in the job, but I'm also so grateful that I did it that way, because I had income coming in that could be allocated for business expenses. And I could work myself up to a point where I had enough savings that when I left corporate, I knew that even if I made no money, I could still run my life, like not a fun, frilly life, but I could run my life for at least 6 months. And so that's what I suggest, is people get into a rhythm of seeing what it is that they actually want to be making, make that amount of money, or have a system that they can see how much they want to be, actually applying to all these different things. And then just work up a savings buffer so that by the time you leave corporate, you can fund your own business.
What about for people who are like stay-at-home moms? So I reach a lot of that audience. They're at home, maybe the husband's working, but they want to start a side hustle or a business or something where they can really help support their family. So what do you suggest they do when they don't have a ton of extra wiggle room in their budget?
I love that question. Okay, so the first thing is it's always good to decide how much you actually want to be contributing to the household. Because you want to be definitely paying yourself something, even if all your expenses are being covered by your partner. So that would be the first thing I would determine. The second thing is to sit down with your family and decide how much are we willing to invest each month in this endeavor? How much can we afford to put towards this business? And that allows you both to set the expectations on the table and also have a clear conversation about what the intentions are. Another thing that I love to do is actually, and this is something I heard from Marie Forleo many years ago, and it was the best advice. Before getting started with B School, she said, make sure you sit down with your loved ones and tell them your big vision, like what you see this business being, what and actual details of it. And for me personally, I knew that number one, I wanted to be location independent and I wanted to be able to travel regularly and speak around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I shared that with my partner, I said, are you willing to be on this journey with me? Do you see yourself actually traveling with me and doing these things? Because that's a big upheaval from having like a corporate job.
Right.
And so whatever that dream is for you, make sure that you've voiced it and that you've stated it out loud so that it can start to be something that people are like in your family, your loved ones are looking at as, okay, this is a possibility. But to bring it back to actual practical things, I would definitely sit down and decide as a family how much you're willing to invest each month. And then just work with that. You know, that's definitely, you can even wait. Time is the best thing with money. So if you decide, okay, we're even going to put $50 a month towards this business, well, you could wait 3 months and you'll have 150. And so you can just start, you know, slowly building it up. And there's so much free content out there as well.
I love what you shared about actually talking to your loved one about your vision, because this is something that I've seen a lot of my clients come across is their spouse isn't supportive. For whatever reason, this has been happening lately where I've come across several people that say, I really want to do this, but my partner won't let me invest. And it always comes, I find, of having that vision conversation of they might just see money going out and not seeing the bigger picture of where you ultimately want to be a year from now, 3 years from now, and how that business is going to be able to serve them.
Absolutely. And also, you know, if you get to a point where you're looking at it and you're saying, I'm willing to take $3,000 investment and put everything into it. And you may put that $3,000 investment on an interest-free credit card.
Mm-hmm.
That with intention can be done in a way that is smart investing. You just don't want to put course after course after course on a credit card and not actually implement. So it's also about really deciding, is this the thing that I'm going to implement? Is this the thing that I'm going to put my heart and soul into? Knowing that if you do all that, you see that return in your future, then at that point it can be a smart investment. So it's not absolutely essential. I just always encourage it so that regardless of how we're paying for something, we're thinking about, am I actually going to apply myself to use this knowledge?
Huge. I see a lot of people like course hopping where they'll buy a course and then they might do like the first module and then nothing.
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, I spent all this money on courses. And I'm like, girl, like you need a coach of someone telling you like what you need to do and what steps to do it in instead of spending all your money on courses, because you're going to end up overwhelmed and then like doing nothing.
Yeah, for sure.
So what do you see as a problem entrepreneurs have as they grow? So we're done with, like, we already have the money to invest, our business is growing. Where do you see them having some problems?
So sometimes businesses, as they're growing, they're seeing larger amounts of money come into their business.
Mhm.
And without having clarity of exactly where that money is going, it can be really easy to start over investing
Mhm.
or growing a team too quickly. Team is definitely number one, where they're saying, oh, I don't have time for this anymore. I'm not going to do this. And that's a kind of like on the edge type of argument. I know many people are like, delegate the thing that you aren't good at. but you can definitely over delegate to the point where it's almost like, this is like beneath me to do, and I'm not going to do it. But then their business can't actually support those extra expenses.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about once you hit like $250,000 a year, $500,000 a year, where do you see them struggle?
So, and then we're talking about a service-based online business, right?
It could be, well, yeah, they could be doing like private coaching or online courses or maybe hosting retreats even.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, the retreats are definitely, I think, one of the most unprofitable ways to grow a business unless you've sat down and truly looked at how much it's going to actually cost you and make sure that you're charging more than that so that you're making a profit.
Yeah.
And on top of that, that you are seeing some sort of result from having the retreat, that your clients are impacted, that they're wanting to continue work with you in some way. Retreats are, I've seen so many businesses go under because they're overspending on retreats or over promising for group programs, saying they're going to add in a retreat without actually looking at the cost behind it. So for a business, it's between $250,000 and $500,000. Let me see. I would say a lot of times they turn to Facebook ads and strategists on Facebook ads thinking that's my next thing without truly understanding what that looks like. And so there can be a lot of money spent on a strategy that isn't necessarily working.
Okay.
And a lot of Facebook ad spend on things that aren't really giving them a return. So that's really what I see mostly in that revenue range.
Interesting. Okay. Why is it so important for us to have a budget and be tracking things?
Well, I always use the word budget like loosely because a lot of times people hear that word and they're like, I'm going to turn this podcast off now.
Yeah,
Like I
run
do
for
not
the
need
hills.
to.
I'm done with that.
Yeah. And I call it the B word. Like no one wants to hear that word. But what a budget really is, like a true budget that looks at your money as if it were a big pile of money and allow you to then organize it with intention and give your money intention, that is where it can get exciting. So if you imagine just taking all your money out of your bank accounts and you put it on a table and you say, okay, what do I need to do with this money? That can be fun, right? Because you can start thinking, what am I going to do with this money? And you can start organizing it into different envelopes with a big black permanent marker and say, okay, yep, this is going to be for my rent next month. This is going to be for dining, and you get all that stuff done. But then if you have money left over, you can say, oh, well, okay, I've been thinking I really want to buy a house. So I'm going to put this leftover money, even if it's $60, I'm going to put it in this envelope for my house. And then you can just start to see evidence that you're working towards the goals that you really want to have.
Mm-hmm.
So a budget gives you actual permission to spend money. Whereas paying for things with not really looking at your money and kind of feeling like you're spending in the dark gives a lot of anxiety and panic when you think about like late at night, like, oh my gosh, why did I buy that thing? I'm not sure if I could buy it. But if you have a budget with allocations that are saying, yes, I am going to plan on spending this money, then you can spend it and feel good about it. So it's giving you permission to do that.
Okay. You talk about emergency funds, having like a personal and a business one. How much should we have in both?
So I definitely am all about aging your money and creating a buffer. I've reworded it from emergency fund because
Okay.
I feel like we call in whatever we label it. So instead I call it a paycheck stash.
Okay. Paycheck stash. I like it.
Yeah. So that way, if you want to take a sabbatical, for 2 months and you have a 6-month paycheck stash, you can do that without feeling like, oh my gosh, where am I going to get this money from? So my standard suggestion is when you first start out, the very first thing you want to do is to see how much you need to be making in your business. That's the first thing. Then assess to see, am I making that money? And if not, what things you need to do to make that money. Once you've done those two things, the next thing is to start working on creating a 2-month buffer in your personal. So the 2-month buffer would be take all your personal expenses and multiply it by 2. And that's going to be your first goal. And a lot of people, what they want to do is anytime they have extra money or they get unexpected money, they put it towards their debt.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely the intuitive thing to do. And I strongly suggest not doing that, because the reason that we go into debt or stay into debt is because we don't typically have extra money set aside in case something comes up. Like I just had a really sad repair on my car. It was $3,400. And I
Oh,
honestly thought, like, maybe I just should get a new car,
totally.
but it's like this really cute Beetle convertible, and I just replaced the top, and I love this car. It makes everybody happy when I drive around, and I have moms and daughters like wave to me when I have my top down. So I was like, no, I'm just going to pay the $3,400. But I was able to make that decision because I had that money set aside, and I chose to use it for that. And it didn't affect my day-to-day spending. So I wasn't going, oh my gosh, now I can't eat out for the next 3 months and I can't do this. It was there. So if I didn't have that, though, it would have gone on a credit card,
Hmm.
because that's a must need to spend, right? Like either I spend that or I don't have a car.
Yeah.
So by first having the 2 months of personal expenses, you avoid having to put things back on a credit card. And then once you've done that, then you can start paying down your debt. So any extra money would go towards your credit cards. And then finally, I recommend doing 6 months. That's typically what I find to be a really good amount for entrepreneurs, because we have more variability. We have, more freedom to be able to do longer trips and things like that. So having 6 months in both business and personal worked really well.
So 6 months of our own personal expenses and then 6 months of the business operating expenses.
Yes. And the 6 month business expenses can come from profit. So by implementing profit first, you will be accumulating profit every quarter,
Right.
and that can be your business buffer.
Where do you suggest we keep that money stashed so it's earning like decent interest?
I'm kind of on the same lines as Ramit Sethi. If you've heard of him, he wrote a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich.
Okay.
And so I have a degree in finance, and the reason I didn't go into financial planning is when I went into my first high-level course, the professor looked around and he said, okay, at least half of you are going to fail out of this, so I'm going to tell you the most important thing you need to know in all of investing to accumulate wealth. And I'm looking around, I'm like, why is everyone's pencils not out? Like,
I'm ready.
well, and he said, since the beginning of our open market in the 1920s, we've consistently been increasing in value 8% plus, adjusted for inflation. So most people on Wall Street try to beat the market. Instead of making 8%, they're trying to make 15, 30, 50%. And some of them do make that happen, but some of them is under 1%. So most people are losing more than the market all the time.
Right.
So if you just put your money in growth stock mutual funds, which mimic the market, and it's super easy to do this, you just invest in it once a month and forget about it. Don't ever look at it until later on. It will grow steadily at 8%. And basically your money will double every 7 years. So the more you can invest now, the better off you'll be in the future.
For sure.
So putting money in a thing that's going to give you a couple $100 in interest, yes, you can do that if it's easy or if you have an assistant that can do that for you. But spending a lot of time on that is, in my mind, not a great use of our time when we could be working on business strategy to be just making more money. But to answer your question, I will say I use Capital One 360,
Okay.
and that works well for me.
Okay. After we have our 6 months cash stash, what should we do with extra profit?
So that's where it gets really fun. So that's what I call profit for joy. So I have this vision for everyone that has a purpose-driven business to be living in a state of profit for joy. And so that's where a business has the 6 months paycheck stash. They have a 6 months business expenses. They have a strategy that's allowing them to be making month after month, hitting their revenue goal, and they're profitable. That extra money every month is going towards their bucket list. And I will be writing a book called Bucket List First, for sure.
Exciting.
I'm so excited about it. And I see this profit for joy society because as I work with more clients, they're getting to a point where they're at this level where they have created these stashes and they have this extra money and they're truly now making decisions on, do we want to, build out our new office first, or do we want to go and visit our family in France for 3 months? Like, they're thinking these things through, things that they never thought were possible 2 years ago. And so I recommend really just visualizing the things that you desire, and put it on a list, and even declare it out loud, make a photo of it and put it on Facebook, and just say, because the power of intention is so strong.
Yep.
And it's so powerful. So I say you just pick one and you start allocating it towards that first milestone, and you enjoy, because it's a resource. It's not meant to just be sitting there accumulating with no purpose.
For sure. Oh, I love that. And I can't wait until your book comes out. And I love the power of having that intention. So that's something that I speak a lot about one of my intentions that I wrote down a few years ago was, we live in France. And it's so crazy because we spent the past 2 years living in France, and like I was able to build my business overseas and do all of that. And like, oh yeah, I love it.
Oh, it's so amazing. I love that. I'm definitely going to be reaching out to you because I want to put these stories in the book for sure.
Oh, totally. That's so exciting. So what would you do to help somebody who's stuck in a spending cycle of their business and they're not profitable? Like, they're just stuck and they keep spending and racking up debt.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So the first thing that I do is just ask them, why do you think they are in this position? What do you think is currently missing? A lot of times we use spending as a numbing mechanism, or as like, I just don't want to look at it. And we get to a point where we're just spending and just ignoring it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to really truly sit down and ask yourself what that could be. The second thing is, once you've kind of identified, well, what if you just say, I don't know, that's fine. You can say, I don't know, sit with it a little longer, but definitely explore that for a while, and maybe even go into a super thinking session. Brooks Castillo talks about this super thinking, where you walk and then you sit down and you just write whatever comes to mind. And I have had the most amazing breakthroughs doing that, where I literally just, whatever is coming into my head, I write down. And it's amazing what will come up out of a session like that. The second thing you can do is just list everything, like pull a bank statement or pull a credit card statement and go through line by line. Did I use that the last 30 days? And if you say no to any of those things, then cancel it. So if it's a recurring subscription, cancel it. Even if you're grandfathered and you're paying $20 and it's now $200 a month, doesn't matter. If you're not using it and you don't see yourself using it in the next 30 days, then cancel it. Now, if you decide, you know what, I'm going to challenge myself, I am going to use this for the next 30 days because I don't want to cancel it, then do that, but hold yourself to that. Go through and make sure that what you're spending on is intentional spending. That would be the first thing. After that, look at your revenue and your pricing and ask yourself, when's the last time I changed my prices? What am I doing to, increase sales, that type of thing? Because we have two ways of doing it. We can either make more money or spend less money. And usually it's a combination of the two.
Mm-hmm. So have you ever dealt with people who have anxiety about money? So I'll actually share what happened to me. It was 2015, 2016, around that time. And I was in network marketing. We were making six figures, but when the company restructured, my income was cut in half. And I hit this point where it gave me literal anxiety to open up my bank account, because I just saw like it was going down and down and down. And that was a low point. That was super low point, but I'm grateful for it because it brought me to where I am now.
I love that. Okay, that's a great story, and it's something that I think so many of us have experienced and very few talk about.
Totally.
So, anxiety, I would say, is one of the very first feelings that people experience when thinking about money, and there are very few people who don't have that reaction. So if you're feeling that, don't feel like you're alone, but it's just not something that people talk about a lot.
Yeah.
I would say that's 99.9% of the people that come to me originally, do have that feeling.
Yeah.
But the thing is, money is truly just a resource. And so it's 99% emotional and behavioral, which is why we have all these other feelings around money: fear, anxiety, overwhelm. feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to look at the bank account because I don't want to see what it says. It's like facing that reality. But as you experience, like, that also allows you to think differently,
Yeah.
because when that happened, it gave you this opportunity to say, okay, what am I going to do? What's going to be done differently?
Yep.
And to realize now that this was the path you were meant to be on, and this is so much more lucrative than what you were doing before,
Yep.
is just super exciting, because then you're like, okay, thank
It
you.
all happens
Thank you.
for a reason, you know, like looking
Yeah.
back, I'm like, okay, now it makes sense.
Yes, absolutely.
So what tools do you use to track? I know in your course you go through some things. So can you share that with us?
Sure. My favorite by far is You Need a Budget. It's an envelope software system, and it's basically the exact budget that I was explaining earlier. Um, some people like to use Every Dollar, which is similar.
Dave Ramsey.
Dave Ramsey. And then there's also one called Envelopes. You can also just open up bank accounts if you want to. I find, though, that people get a lot more progress when they use an envelope software versus just the bank accounts,
Okay.
because you can really see exactly where your money's going, how much money you have to apply towards next month's expenses as you're working on building that buffer. And it can be really motivating, for sure. I had this vision of putting Mike Michalowicz, who's the author of Profit First, and Jesse Meekum, the founder of YNAB, in the same room. I really wanted them to meet. And this is, again, the power of intention, right? Like, I put that out there, and then less than a year later, I was sitting in Manhattan with Mike and Jesse at a table, and we were having a conversation.
Amazing.
It was so cool. I was totally geeking out. I was like, I mean, Mike I've been working with for quite a while, but Jesse, I was like, I'd known him for a long time just through his podcast. So sitting there together, it was so nice to see how Jesse, who had used YNAB for so long, and obviously he created the thing, and I had used something similar in Excel for a long time before coming across it. But it was so nice to see him having mindset shifts around how Profit First works.
Mm-hmm.
So, because he said, I ran a business for so long. Yeah, we were profitable because we were really intentional with where we were spending our money. But to actually give myself permission to spend some of this profit was mind-blowing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was for me too. So there's all sorts of different money scripts that we hold and carry. And to be able to give yourself permission about, okay, I'm going to actually spend my money consciously on something that's just for fun, that is part of the profit. So, but YNAB for sure is my favorite software.
YNAB. Cool. What are the different bank accounts you recommend that we have?
So if you're using YNAB, I highly suggest using one bank account only, maybe
Okay.
two. You can have a savings account if you want to put your stash in there to make some extra interest. But the less accounts you have, the better, because it's less work for you. You can just reconcile one account versus a whole bunch.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to go the traditional Profit First route, then you want to have 5 bank accounts. So you'd at least, and they have a saying, when in doubt, open an account. So it's almost like the exact opposite, but you want to think of accounts as envelopes. So YNAB gives you unlimited envelopes, whereas if you open up bank accounts, then you have whatever the bank will allow you to open. And trust me, there are banks out there that are happy to give you 20 accounts if you sit down and call them enough times. But the 5 accounts that it would be one for all the money coming in to your business, and then one for profit, one for taxes, one for your owner's pay, and the ultimate one would be one for business expenses. And so all the money would come into the income account, and then you would just transfer a percentage of that money into the 4 other accounts every time you either got deposits or twice a month.
Gotcha. Can we talk taxes? What are some mistakes you see being made? And I'll share one of mine. So when my business was growing, we went from $20,000 a year to $80,000 a year back in like 2013, I think. And in that time, I was young and naive. I was like 25, and I had no idea that I had to like set aside money for future taxes. I just listened to my accountant who said pay quarterly. And so we ended up with a $12,000 tax bill, which led to that anxiety of later, like trying to pay that off. So what are some mistakes you see people making and how can we prevent them?
Well, I want to preface this with saying I'm definitely not a tax expert.
Yeah.
I will say that what I see mostly is that exact situation that you were sharing.
Learn from my
Yeah.
mistakes.
Yeah, and because it's one of those things where we think like, oh yeah, taxes, and when we're paid in corporate, most taxes are taken out already, so we don't usually owe a lot at the end of the year. But with an LLC, it's a good it's just a good practice to put a certain percentage of whatever you receive, even if that's all you take away from this podcast, is like whenever you make money, have a separate account for taxes
Mhm.
and move a certain percentage. That percentage is deemed by your accountant, but usually if you're in the US and you're a service-based business, anywhere between like 20 and 25% is definitely conservative. I have a tax accountant who says, oh, I can get it down to 7. And so there are definitely amazing CPAs out there who can legally get your taxes very low. But just in the interim, if you don't have an S Corp set up and you haven't done some extra steps to reduce your taxes, a good place to start is 20-25%. But again, this isn't tax advice. This is just what I've seen in my experience. And by doing that with every dollar that comes in, and just thinking of it as not your money anymore. This is the IRS's money. And then you can pay your estimates or your quarterly estimates from that bank account, but just leave the rest of the money in there. So at the end of the year, if you end up being more profitable than you expected, which is definitely a good thing, then you have the money to pay the taxes.
That's what happened to us this past year. We made way more than we did the previous year, like 10 times as much or more than that. And so,
That's so
but
amazing.
yeah, it was awesome. But I was burned that previous time. So like I learned from that mistake and I had the money set aside. So when I had to write that massive check, which was more than I like had ever written ever, I was prepared for it.
That's so great.
Like that was a good feeling. When you say 20 to 25%, is that profit or total?
A total from your total true revenue. So if you make 100,000, putting aside 25,000 or 20,000 or 15,000. So in other words, 15, 20, or 25%. But again, I almost don't even want to say percentages because you really want to talk to your tax accountant.
For sure.
Because some people have a tax situation where their husband had a business that had losses. And so every year they're not really paying taxes. Or
Yeah.
you might be in a situation where you're a single person and you have no deductions and don't have any children, and then you end up owing way more. So
Right.
I personally like to hold aside way more than I need. So
Yeah.
then at the end of the year, I'm just getting a huge refund to myself. But that's arguably not the most financially savvy thing to do. But it's also, again, 99% behavioral and emotional. And so for me, it works really well.
Totally, totally. So can we talk the difference between total money coming in and profit? Because this is something I ask people, what are your goals? Like, what do you want to create together over the next year? And they tell me, I want to make like $10,000 a month. And I'm like, great. Is that total or profit? Because there's a difference. And they're like, huh, I never thought about that. And so can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So traditionally, when someone hears profit, it truly is, the definition is revenue minus expenses equals profit.
Mhm.
So you want to take all your revenue. If it was 10,000, let's say you had $6,000 in expenses, and your profit would be $4,000. Profit First likes to think of it a little bit differently. Take your profit first. So revenue minus profit equals expenses. So
Mhm.
whatever you have left, you can spend on expenses. Um, so when there's a couple of things, I hear a lot of times people say, okay, is that profit? Well, I don't personally like to look at profit in the traditional way, because even having revenue minus expenses equals profit, you still have to pay yourself. You still have to have money for taxes, and you still want to be able to create some sort of buffer for yourself. So I don't find that to be very useful.
Mhm.
Instead, what I like to do is reverse engineer it and say, okay, how much do I actually want to see in my bank account, my personal bank account, every month? How much do I want to be paying myself? What do I want my take home pay to be? and start from there, because we all went into business for some type of freedom or autonomy or desire that we currently weren't experiencing that, in our regular life. So I like to look at, for me, travel is everything. I love to travel, and I want to travel comfortably.
Yeah,
So, so that
totally.
is, yeah. So I look at, okay, I don't really care about having a huge house. So I live in a 1-bedroom condo, and it's super reasonable in the DC area, and it allows me to have so much more money to be able to put towards travel.
Yeah.
So that's my personal intention. So looking at, okay, well, if I want to travel once a quarter, once a month, and I want to make sure that my partner can travel with me, and we want to travel comfortably, and we want to be able to enjoy like some really awesome new experiences, like fancy dinners. And I'm all about the experience and the travel. So I'll look at that and say, okay, I want this much to be allocated every 3 months for this, or every month for this. And then after that, I look at, okay, how much is my business costing me? And that's going to be part of the expense category. So again, your money is going to be in 4 different categories. It's going to be profit, it's going to be owner's pay or your take-home pay, your business expenses, and taxes. So we want to just come up with those 4 things. How much do we actually want to have in profit, which is really the extra money that you can allocate towards savings and towards your bigger milestone goals? And then take home pay, which is how much do you want to be able to experience on a monthly basis, what your business expenses are, and then have enough money for your taxes. So at the end of the year, you're not stuck with a tax bill.
So can you help us reverse engineer it? So let's say someone wants to make $10,000 a month. How much would their business actually need to be making for them to be able to take home in their bank account $10,000 a month for their owner's pay?
Yeah. So the best thing to do would be to download my calculator. So
Yes,
that's
it's so
something.
helpful. I love it.
Yeah. So it's literally just need 4 numbers. So the 10,000 would go into the first box. The second box would be your business expenses amount. And then you choose whatever your percentage is for taxes and choose your percentage for profit. And it will then spit out a number for you that's going to give you that number. So if we're going to do it just like without using the calculator, and they had maybe $5,000 in expenses and they wanted 20% taxes and 5% profit, it's roughly double. So it'd be about 20,000 that they'd want to be making
Right.
to be able to pay themselves 10. And that's sometimes something that I find we have a really hard time facing, right? Because
Totally.
it's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I have to make 20,000 to pay myself 10.
Yeah.
And I have a client I will never forget. She said, Amber, I will never be able to buy toothpaste without thinking this again. Like she says, my toothpaste that's $5 is not $5. It's $10. She would like double everything. She's like, I need to bring in $10 to buy that toothpaste. But it really allowed her to reframe and look at the bigger picture of what it is that it was really necessary to not feel anxiety all the time, to not feel like she doesn't have enough money. And this is the core reason why so many people feel like they don't have enough money, because of the fact that we aren't able to see the whole picture of how much we truly need to be making to have all of these things, because they are kind of hidden and not necessarily built in. So
And
that's
it's
a great
something that
question.
people don't talk about like ever. I remember. So where can they get your calculator, by the way?
Oh, it's amberdugger.com/calculator.
Okay.
AMB, and we can give you a link as well.
Yeah,
But
we'll
it's
totally put
spelled
it in
with
the
an
show notes.
E. Everyone spells my name wrong. So it's DUGGER .com.
We'll put it in the show notes. But I remember the first time I did the calculator and it just really put things into perspective. I was like, okay. Like now I have that next level goal of, if I really want to be able to bring home this much and this is the impact we want to make, then I need to make sure our business is making this much, which is a much higher number.
Yeah, and it's exciting, right? Because then you can start thinking, like, you think differently. You think,
Yes.
okay, what is it do I need to do to actually hit that? And it
Yeah.
becomes possible because you now have the confidence to know that this number means something,
Yes.
because it's built on what you desire, not your neighbor, not someone down the street, like what you personally desire.
Awesome. So you've talked about a few different books. Profit First. I Will Make You Rich. Is that the other one?
I will teach you to be
I
rich
Will Teach You to Be
by,
Rich. Okay.
mm-hmm.
What's the best book you've read?
Oh, That's a great question. I immediately think The Big Leap, which is not necessarily a financial practical book, but it's definitely a mindset book
Yeah.
that helped me tremendously with taking the leap to leave corporate. So for me, that was a huge deal because I am the least likely to go into business for myself as a Myers-Briggs thing. The other one that I really, really love is this one, Tapping into Wealth.
Tapping
And
into wealth.
yeah, and it's obviously something I reference multiple times a day with clients. It's just an incredible book on allowing you to understand why you feel a certain way about money.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me personally, I was really scared to spend my money, and I felt like there was a lot of judgment around buying business class seats, for example.
Yeah.
And so I had to do a lot of work on recognizing that buying business class seats isn't a bad thing. It's something that for me personally brings me a lot of joy and fulfillment to know
Heck
that I
yes.
am comfortable.
I'm with you.
Yeah, and there are going to be some people they would love to save the money and they don't want to go on business, and that's fine too.
Yeah,
But it's just like really getting clear on what it is that really brings you fulfillment. And that's going to
totally.
be different for everyone. Like I'm not a big clothes person, so I'm not going to spend thousands on clothes, but I have clients who have $9,000 clothing budgets, and that's totally great because that's what brings them joy. And that's ultimately the only thing we want to be looking at is, does this bring me joy? Is this something that fulfills me? Do I feel like, yes, I'm a complete person because this is in my life?
Totally. What does it mean to you to make an impact?
Mm. I think it stems along the lines of what I just mentioned. If you're sitting in a high vibrational state and you are fulfilled and you are experiencing this heart coherence, it vibrates out and it has a ripple effect. And so I love to go back to that sentence from The Big Leap. I expand in abundance, success, and joy, and I inspire those around me to do the same. And I really feel that that is the true definition of impact.
Love. What's next for you?
Oh, what's next for me? Well, I'm really excited to be collaborating more with people who are really amazing at elevating people's revenue and their revenue game,
Yeah.
because those are the two things. It's like, okay, you want to have more clarity around your money, and you want to be very clear on what you want to be doing with that money. And you want to feel like you have a system that you can actually use, and you want support on how to make those next level goals happen. So I'm really excited about some collaborations that are forming. And I'm also been asked by Mike Michalowicz to write the Profit First for wellness entrepreneurs. So I'm going to be coming out with a book in the
That's
next 12
amazing.
months or so. Yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Oh, I love it. Where can we connect with you?
Well, I'm on Facebook. It's Amber Duggar. It's Profit with Amber, I think. And I have a Facebook group, Sweet Life Purposeful Money. And I'm also on Instagram at profit.with.amber.
Cool, cool. Well, this has been so helpful. Thank you so much for sharing everything with us. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. And I hope that those of you listening really truly feel that it is possible for you to be empowered with your money, and that you are not alone if you're feeling a little bit of overwhelm with this. And just know that it just takes one step at a time, but we've totally got your back.
Yes. Thank you.